Pleasure.
Welcome back from the other side of the pond.
Thank you.
The situation in the world generally seems to be getting more complex week by week and at an accelerating rate. And what I find most interesting this week is that everybody seems to have a tendency to put the blame on particular people.
Uh-huh.
And now the big question, of course, is whether it's individual people who are causing things to happen or whether it's social forces. And in a way, this is a return to the old nature versus nurture debate, I suppose. But, do we do what we do because of the way we're born, because of our genetic programming, or do we do what we do because of our social experience? And that's been a debate in anthropology for many decades. In fact, it's the way I came into anthropology.
So that's where B.F. Skinner got all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The context of the debate is different today, because when the debate was really got off the ground, and I came into it in the 60s. We didn't think in terms of change. We thought of the world the way it is, and we wanted to understand it the way it was. Now you can't understand the world unless you understand how it's changing. So what's this debate got to do with the way the world is changing now? And a lot of people still want to say, and even The Economist wants to say, that Putin is actually the person who's woven a web of lies and is now having difficulty maintaining the web and making sure that he gets what he wants.
There's no question that this has now become personalized upon him.
Especially because he got such a boost in domestic popularity at one stage of it. But is it really possible in the modern world for any particular person to cause things to happen on a large scale? That's one of the theories of history is the big man idea that particular people have charisma and they're able to make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Did Clinton manage things when he was president, and did George Bush fail to manage things when he was president? Or are they both doing what they did and getting the credit of what happened during their presidencies because of what was going on in the world generally? Mm-hmm. And of course, people make both those arguments all the time, but still, I think we have this tendency to personalize things. And I think it's particularly interesting now because of what I'm arguing all the time in terms of globalization, that the way people respond to each other, react to each other, expect from each other, is changing qualitatively faster now than it's ever changed before, simply because more and more people every year are actually interacting with each other in a way in which they're aware of what's going on, whereas in the past most of them weren't. Mm-hmm. And not only are they aware of what's going on, but they think they have a say in it in a way that they didn't used to think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for that reason, I think that it's very difficult to understand the current situation in such a way that one could ascribe all the blame to one man, Putin or anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I had just come from a very interesting lunch I had with some old friends in which this nature versus nurture debate came up. And one of the questions that came up in that context was, why do people fight? And why are so many people fighting today? And what do these people in eastern Ukraine think they're going to get out of fighting when they're obviously putting their lives at risk?
Mm-hmm.
Why do people put their lives at risk today? Is it because they're young and they think they'll live forever and they stop doing it when they get past a certain age? I mean, that's one of the ideas that some people promote sometimes. Or do they think they're fighting for truth and therefore it's worth their lives if they lose their lives? Or what actually is going on? And of course, if you want to explain everything in terms of social forces, which I think is an argument worth pursuing, though I'm not convinced totally that it explains everything, then you can say that more people are working together now. That is, there's more collective learning going on with more and more minds on the same wavelength than ever before. But there are social boundaries. And we're not in control of the social boundaries. And the social boundaries, a lot of them that we see now are different from the ones we would have seen a decade ago, several decades ago. Mm-hmm. And it's those social boundaries that prevent people interacting with each other, learning from each other, working together, that are the fault lines where the conflict emerges. What we need to do is to try to work out ways to bridge those social fault lines.
Well, I think some of the social fault lines are being eroded by the increasing communication and the increasing communication between people and more people talking to each other, the whole globalization aspect that we've been talking about. Because I think as more and more people begin to have contact with each other and more people know part of, or as much as possible of, what the other person knows or wishes to convey to them, then I think increasingly what happens is that light begins to be shown on areas. For example, these areas of conflict that we've spoken about. Now, it wouldn't have been all that long ago that a civil war in the Ukraine would have attracted much attention in the West. All right, certainly if it was still pre-dissolution of the Soviet Union, then it would have been a minor news item. It certainly would have been not long ago at all where these conflicts in Africa, in the South Sudan, or in Mali would have attracted any attention at all. In fact, it still surprises me that those responses in the West to Bangladesh and to Biafra back in the 70s even occurred back then. So I think to some extent, and not to mention the fellow in Uganda, Joseph Kony, all right, who has a group of like 300 guerrilla members who became a international cause celeb several years ago. So I mean, my suspicion is as more and more people begin to get in horizontal discussion with each other. In fact, what it's doing is it's shining light in areas of the world that have never really been looked at before. And I think I focused only on conflict because you asked the question, why are people killing each other in conflict? But I think it's even led to the corruption reforms that we've seen in, of all places, China, where President Xi is throwing out some pretty bigwigs, former bigwigs, and he's getting perilously close to Jiang Zemin. Jiang Zemin, who's 90 some odd years old and sort of in his dotage, is still apparently controlling 4 of the 7 seats on the Politburo. It's interesting to me, having just come back from the UK and thinking in the plane last night flying home, about the so-called Five Eyes Agreement, which is an intelligence agreement between Australia, the UK, New Zealand, Canada, and the US, where they share all intelligence information. Theoretically, the US government does not withhold anything from the Five Eyes group. I don't know why it's called Five Eyes. It should be called 10 Eyes. But nevertheless, it's obvious because of the common linguistic foundation, the common language. What would happen to globalization with the technology at hand now if there was one language on the planet? This would spread like wildfire through a dry forest.
Well, I think that the reason sorry, it's 5 eyes because it's 5 intelligence units, isn't it?
Yes.
Initial
Oh,
eye.
that's right. I see. Very good, Professor.
Uh,
From an anthropologist, very good.
but
Right.
I think it's 5 eyes because there were these countries that all had English as their national language at a time when the written English language provided a standard for everybody to use.
Correct.
India never got linked up to that because the English is already sufficiently different in India from the other
Hmm.
English-speaking countries that they're seen as being different, and gradually the written language is losing its significance. So the chance of the whole world speaking one language is, I think, disappearing. So I think that sort of uniformity in world organization is not likely to happen.
But yet some things are happening. I mean, there are these emoticons that are used in communicating via text and Twitter. There are other things. I don't know, but I mean, it just struck me as very interesting because having had dinner every night over there with colleagues in the UK, the cultural differences are still there to some extent, but everybody has watched the same television shows, including me. Everybody has gone to the same movies, including me. Everybody has read the same novels, the same best-selling books, including me. So there's a wide playing field of shared commonalities that didn't exist 25 years ago. I mean, to
But they
have
have different opinions.
they have different opinions.
And are the opinions the result of their genetic programming or of their different social experiences? And is Xi Jinping's efforts to get rid of certain people that are very influential in the Chinese system in ways that might be considered corrupt, is that his own personal decision to do this, which he hopes will be supported by everybody? Or is he responding to what's going on around him and feeling that he's more chance of getting the credit he wants if he does that than if he doesn't do it? And the same issue, I think, is the case with Putin. What do you do if you want to lead Russia and hold it together as one enormous country that really was never a country anyway? It was an empire.
Right.
Like China, for that matter. But by the way, China's having more and more trouble in the Northwest, as you may have noticed.
Oh, yes.
Because of its heritage as an empire.
There's
So
nothing like those Uyghurs.
I mean, in some ways, England is lucky that its empire was not a land empire, but a sea empire, so it could see what was not England and what was England, and it got rid of what wasn't England, and it's now stuck with the things that that are contiguous to it, and trying to work out whether they should still belong to it or not.
Right.
France has held on to a lot of things that were empire in different parts of the world, but they're so small that they're not likely to cause it much trouble. In fact, they probably cost it more than they're worth.
Yes, they do. It's a prestige thing, though.
Yeah. It doesn't make us think that France rules the seas just because it has naval bases in different parts of the world.
Right. I do have to wonder, though, whether or not Putin would have acted the way he did had not the U.S. been retreating from 2 wars, had not the general economic crisis have occurred, where the West is sort of licking its economic wounds over the past 4 or 5 years, and had essentially the whole Western democracy bloc almost turned inward-looking. I mean, it's sort of
he's manipulating the situation, but
yes, he is.
Got enormous amount of support at home because there's a lot of people in Russia, and especially in the most densely populated parts of Russia, that wonder what's happening to Russia, given how important it was in the world up until 1990, and the fact that in the last 20 years its future is uncertain.
Yeah, but there's something else that's happening, and I noticed there was an article on the Times of London on Tuesday. It was the first time I saw this, that the average Russian is beginning to become concerned over the effect of the sanctions. And you have to remember that I had to remember, the article brought this out, is that if you're a 25 or 28-year-old now in Russia, you don't know anything about the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
You've read about it. Your parents might have told you about it. They probably grumbled about it tremendously. But you don't have that experience where you think that you were part of a once great empire.
Well, what are of all the people in the Russian Federation who think that they want the Soviet Union back? How many? What's the age range of those people? Is it?
Well,
Is it?
I don't know the answer, but my suspicion, whether or not this is from movies and novels of aging Red Army veterans with those medals that you can buy for a dime a dozen at railway stations over there, meeting in shabby upstairs rooms, smoking unfiltered cigarettes. That's but I'm sure that's incorrect. But
But they. I mean, the things that the Soviet Union was a welfare state, and the Russian Federation isn't, and I think that's part of what's going on. Anyway, one thing that I think we need to bear in mind is that there's a lot of different variation in the thinking about sanctions in Europe between America, Britain, Germany, and other parts of the whatever they're called now, all the people who are involved in this. And Merkel seems to be playing a very important role in this because of her background, having grown up in East Germany, and I think she knows Russian very well. And so she understands very well what's going on in both sides. But of course, she has a very European point of view about things. But German industry has German banks have a lot to lose from sanctions, and that's bad for her. London has a lot to lose financially from sanctions, and that's in Cameron's mind because he's got to win an election very soon. America doesn't have to worry so much about any of these things.
but as of Wednesday morning, until the U.S. responded, the Europeans were ahead of the U.S. in sanctions.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
But
everybody is. I mean, the downing of the Malaysian airliner in the Ukraine changed the
well,
opinions of people.
that certainly was.
A big mistake.
I mean the thing is that every now and then something happens which is a total accident that really changes the balance of opinion on both sides, at least for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I mean, almost certainly that was, they weren't whoever was responsible for that, I don't know, we'll know exactly what happened, was hoping to shoot down a Ukrainian jet, not a civil airlines jet.
Right.
And that changed the balance on both sides. It'll take a while before that factor runs its course, mm-hmm. and get back to the interplay of the social forces on both sides.
There's some discussion about boycotting the 2020 World Cup, which is going to be held in Moscow, or 2018 World Cup. I don't know. I mean, it's too far away.
Yes.
Things will change dramatically by then.
Yeah.
By the way, the Commonwealth Games are going on now, and of all places, Glasgow. And when the Queen appeared there at the opening day, there had been a collective breath holding going on, wondering what was going to happen, because the Scottish secession vote is in 5 weeks. But apparently she received a rapturous and enthusiastic foot-stamping response. It went on for like 5 minutes. People were overwhelmed.
Is this a movement towards globalization or against it?
I don't know.
You notice she didn't send Charles in this case, as she did to the last Commonwealth conference in Sri Lanka.
Right. Well, he gets those odd trips. Yes. There are 30 Commonwealth nations competing.
maybe Cameron told her to go simply because he thought this would be good for keeping Scotland in the Union.
It's possible. It's possible. I mean, it's a very interesting situation over there.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen. I asked a number of people, and that the vote still seems too close to call.
But what have we got? Another 6 weeks before we find out?
Sometime in September, exactly.
That's going to be quite a what a nail-biting
It will be.
12 hours or so. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for the time today, Professor.
Okay, it was an interesting time, and it'll be probably more interesting next week.
I hope it's not too much more interesting. All right. All right. Thanks very much. All right.